You gotta
We
move
are,
that over to here.
no, it's okay. We are continuing to read Called to Serve, Autobiographies of Don and Doris Ann Roth. We're on part 1, or section 1 of the book that Dad wrote, and starting chapter 6. College, Marriage, and Fatherhood. Classes, study, work, and social life, all 4 were essential to a well-rounded education and foundation for the future. Studying very seldom occurred in my North Hall, 3rd floor dormitory room. The hallways buzzed with noise. I went to the library next door to not only study, but also to do research. The basement of the college press is where I put in many hours at night at the L-Rod machine. Because of the nature of the job, an operator needed to be near the machine at all times. It could run, however, for 10 to 12 minutes without the operator paying any attention, like putting in new lead, quote, pigs, or taking off completed lead strips.
New lead, what?
Pigs. That was the term.
What is it?
I don't know what a pig is. It's something about
Pig.
pig,
I didn't
P-I-G. Many nights I studied at a makeshift desk beside the L-Rod machine, the time punctuated with visits from the night watchman, visits providing an interlude in an otherwise boring and isolated job. Dating. This is where you come in. The third element of college life, social, was very restricted because of all the rules and regulations set by the deans of the 2 dormitories. Social visits came at mealtimes. Men sometimes enjoyed a scheduled visit or date in Halcyon Hall, the girls' dormitory, or a Saturday night program in Columbia Hall. So here is a photo.
They were hard on us then, huh?
That's titled Doris and Don at a College Banquet in 1947. There it is. Early in my college days, I signed up to become an usher for the Lyceum, a series of Saturday night programs arranged by Dr. Sidney Tymeson. Tymeson. Did I pronounce that right? Tymeson?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Perfect.
The programs usually attracted a capacity crowd in Columbia Hall and included some very good Lyceum-type programs. My assignment on the balcony of Columbia Hall provided a good view of the crowd below, and this is where we had reserved seats. Social life and dating in particular provided a diversion in the rather tedious hours spent in class and at work. During my first year in college, I dated a few girls, a mixture of young ladies, some I knew well and others I did not know well at all. Getting acquainted determined my future course in spending time with specific individuals. I always looked for that certain, quote, spark, which indicated some real attraction and interest. During my second year of college, I started dating a person whom I had met years before when I was an elementary school student in Pittsburgh. Doris Ann Beringer. Who's that? Who's that? That's you. Belonged to a family in my father's church in, quote, Little Washington. She became good friends with my older sister Lillian. So by the time we attended college together, I had known her for at least 4 or 5 years. In Doris, I found a serious student who earned good grades, a leader in the Halcyon Hall Club and Sabbath School, a good conversationalist, a very pleasing personality, and someone who had religious convictions and stability of character. Wow, those are all very complimentary descriptions of you. So I started to date her on a regular basis, and she seldom turned me down. I did find out very quickly that she had one minor dislike. I started to grow a mustache during my sophomore year, and when she saw it, she had a very negative reaction. In fact, she turned down a request for a Saturday night date when I had not shaved off the hair above the lip. The following week, noting her serious conviction on the subject of mustaches, I shaved it off and to this day never tried to grow one again. Isn't that funny? Doris worked in the business office.
The kids would laugh at that, huh?
Yeah. Doris worked in the business office of the college, and I worked on the opposite side of the campus, the College Press building. But we did see each other at meal times and sometimes between classes. The bond became closer as time went along. when it became evident to the two of us that we were getting, quote, serious about the relationship. I prayed about the matter and wanted to make sure that if she was not the one I should choose for a life companion, that God should intervene in some way. It is difficult at this point to put an exact day and date when I decided, but sometime in early 1948, I went to a local store and purchased a watch for Doris as an engagement gift. Valentine's Day was coming up, and I thought that this would be a good time to, quote, pop the question. What's the question?
Will you marry me?
Yes. Engaged. I invited Doris to go to Columbia Hall, where I had an office as editor of the Sligonian. When we got to the third floor headquarters for our school paper, we found that we had the room to ourselves with nobody else present. In the quietness of that office, I popped the question and asked Doris if she would marry me. I do not think that I went down on my knees, but I would have done so if she had asked me. If I remember correctly, she gave me an immediate affirmative answer. Yes, I will marry you. There was one concern: finishing college. I assured her that I would not want her to quit college, as so many other students had done when they became engaged and married. I recall going very quickly to the phone to talk to Doris's parents. We could not reach them until the next day. Mom Berenger had only one concern: Doris should finish college as planned. Her dad said she knows what she wants. The agreement quickly became a reality, and we were officially engaged. The plan including finishing the school year, and then I would work for the summer in order to earn money for a honeymoon trip. We set the date of August 29, 1948 for the marriage to take place in her hometown of Washington, Pennsylvania. She went home a couple of weeks before the wedding to help her mother with the arrangements. The next section is titled 3 Jobs. In the meantime, I worked 3 jobs every day. During the daylight hours, I worked at the college press, where I had employment all 5 years of my college experience. As soon as
5 years.
Yeah. As soon as I got out of work at 5 p.m., I headed for the basement of the Washington Sanitarium and Hospital, where I washed pots and pans for several hours in the cafeteria. About 10 p.m., I went to another section of the hospital where I became a night, quote, nurse for an elderly man who needed help during the night getting in and out of his hospital bed.
I'm sure that your kids would like to read something like that.
Mm-hmm. Roscoe Bartlett normally did the job, but he wanted time off for the summer and asked me to take his place. Thus, for about 2 months, I worked as hard as I could to prepare for the day where I no longer would work such long hours. Besides that, I needed a few extra dollars to use on a honeymoon after the wedding. One of the ways I used to raise personal need money was to donate blood on a regular basis, either at the Washington Sanitarium and Hospital across from our college campus or at the Walter Reed Hospital. The usual payment totaled $25. In our many discussions after we became engaged, Doris and I agreed that we needed 2 more years in order to finish college. We rented a small apartment at 603 Erie Avenue in Tacoma Park, just 1 block from the college campus, where we lived after the wedding and honeymoon trip to Canada.
I forget where it was.
Wedding. A few days before the wedding, I went to Washington, Pennsylvania. My mother and father, brother Harold and wife, and all 3 sisters came for the event. My father, a very active clergyman, conducted the service. So, Dad's father conducted the service for your wedding, and my father, Don, conducted the service for Kathy's and my wedding. Blistering heat met us on our wedding day. One of the things I recall very clearly is perspiring in my tuxedo during the service. The reception was held at the home of Doris's parents, an address that we will never forget, 185 Henderson Avenue, Washington, Pennsylvania. Mostly close church friends and relatives showed up to wish us well. August 29 will ever be a red letter day in our lives. After the wedding, Doris's parents gave us the use of their car, so we left for Pittsburgh to spend our first night at the William Penn Hotel. We both remember waking up in the morning to the sound of jackhammers on the street outside the hotel. Okay, there's 2 photos here.
They were working in Pittsburgh, was it?
Yep. at the William Penn Hotel. They must have been working on the street outside.
Uh-huh.
Okay, this first photo is titled Doris Ann and Don were married August 29, 1948 in Washington, Pennsylvania.
Let me see that.
This one
Oh,
right there.
I
Excuse me.
can't see it.
Okay, the second photo is the wedding party with Doris's parents, Robert and Doris Beringer, at the left, and Don's parents, Matilda and Daniel Roth, at the right. So there is the photo.
Where'd she get
And
her
there's the
name?
photo.
Matilda.
I don't know. From Pittsburgh, we headed west to visit Mom and Dad's Roth's home in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where we switched cars and took Dad's Buick to Canada. On the way, we stopped in Chicago and visited the Railroad Fair, as well as the Museum of Science and Industry, an outstanding attraction in the, quote, Windy City. A small
what?
Windy City, that's the nickname for Chicago. A small cabin near the beach on the lake near Thessalon, Ontario, Canada, was the major venue of our honeymoon. There we had a quiet and restful time, swimming, boating, and enjoying each other. Time sped by quickly, and we soon drove back to resume school and a work program. Here's another photo, Don and Doris during their honeymoon trip to Canada, August 1948. Back in college again. Back in Tacoma Park, our first apartment on Erie Avenue included one room on the second floor with a tiny kitchen. We shared a bathroom with the landlord's two sons. It was too small a place for both of us to study, so we took turns going to the library. After a few months, we knew that we needed larger quarters, so we rented an unfurnished apartment at 808 Kennebec Avenue in Tacoma Park. We purchased new bedroom furniture, blonde, which I think that Diane used and maybe still has, I'm not sure. A second-hand sofa and chair, and the Beringers gave us their old kitchen table and chairs. We lived right across the street from a man who was at that time president of the church's North American division, N.C. Wilson, father of the man who is to be my future boss, Neil C. Wilson. What a privilege to get acquainted with this denominational leader. The next 2 years sped by quickly for both Doris and me. Both of us worked many hours per week in addition to our classwork. Doris worked in the college business office doing student accounting and writing and waiting on the counter, so she had opportunity on a daily basis to get acquainted with students. I continued my work in the composing room of the college press. By this time, I had become efficient in the use of two machines, Ludlow and Elrod, the use of which I mentioned earlier. On a regular basis every Monday, I made up the Visitor, the weekly publication of the Columbia Union Conference. I became good friends with the editor, Warren F. Adams. Years later, the Union Committee
Warren Adams was the editor of what?
Of the Visitor, the weekly publication of the Columbia Union Conference. Years later, the Union Committee appointed me as the editor of the Visitor, and Warren became the managing editor. We worked together for many years on this publication. Graduation. The time finally came for the grand finale of graduation. The class of 1950, of 93 members, was the largest in the history of the school, the reason being the flood of veterans who returned from World War II and took advantage of the government funding of higher education. Graduation took place the first part of June 1950 in the auditorium of the Sligo Church, and that's where I graduated in 1981, which was 31 years later. I graduated from Columbia Union College in, I think, April of 1981. Okay, Sligo Church, the place where we had our membership for 5 years. Richard Fearing led our class as president and directed many of our class activities. In accordance with our promise to Mom and Dad Beringer, Doris and I walked down the aisle together to receive our diplomas and teaching certificates. There were 3 other married couples who also graduated with us. During the last year of college, I became good friends with the director of the Bureau of Press Relations of the General Conference, J. Roland Farron. He knew that I wrote on a regular basis. Yep.
F-E-R-R-E-N.
Yes, Ferren. He knew that I wrote on a regular basis for the Tacoma Journal and the Washington Star. He started working on my behalf to obtain some type of employment with the denomination in the areas of my main interest, writing and journalism. And here's a photo. After 5 years of study and work, Don receives his college diploma from William Shepard, president, in June 1950. Looking for a job.
So why are you turning to that to take?
Because we're videotaping, we're recording, reading, so then you can watch it later and anybody else that wants to watch it. So I'm holding it up so they can see the photos as I'm reading the captions of the photos. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to see the pictures. Looking for a job. At that point in the history of our denomination, no local conference had ever hired a full-time public relations person. The Pacific Union Conference had hired a full-time public relations director. That person was Don Thomas, a man for whom I had much admiration and from whom I received a great deal of assistance until his untimely death.
I received what?
A great deal of assistance until his untimely death a few years later. The first call I received was to teach at a junior academy in Waynesboro, Pennsylvania. Another call came for me to join the Greater New York Conference, where my main work would have been to operate a small printing plant at the conference office and did not involve too much work with churches. The third call came from the Ohio Conference to serve as a ministerial intern. Not all of the theology graduates were receiving calls at that time. After much prayer and careful consideration, I told my department chairman, Elder Milton Conger, that I could not go to Ohio. I recall that he became very upset with me.
Milton Conger.
Yeah, and gave me a rather severe lecture about the decision that I had made. I had one more invitation to a job about this time. This one came from the state editor of the Washington Star, one of the major newspapers in Washington, D.C., who wanted me to become a journalism intern at the Star. I had become very well acquainted with this man as I hand-delivered many news stories to him over a period of several years. He was very puzzled when I turned him down and told him I preferred to work for my church instead of for a daily newspaper. A job at last. Then a call came from the president of the East Pennsylvania Conference, Elder Tobias E. Unruh, a person on whom Elder Farron had been working for quite some time. Elder Unruh asked me to come to Philadelphia for an interview. Elder Farron took me in his car to the conference office. The call involved a new position and would include 5 departments of the conference: public relations, radio, TV, medical, temperance, and stewardship. He then told me that the committee would consider this and then inform me of their decision. The call eventually came for me to join the staff of the East Pennsylvania Conference in October 1950. In the meantime, I had started full-time denominational work on June 1 with the college press and received several months of denominational service credit before I transferred to the conference. This is the Pennsylvania Conference. Our first car. A car was a necessity, so we purchased a brand new 1950 Plymouth for $1,600. How proud we were of our first automobile. After terminating work at the Washington College Press, where I had worked for 5 full years, we made a trip to Pennsylvania and Wisconsin to visit our parents, and then headed to Philadelphia to our first jobs. We lived in Bala Cynwyd, a suburb of Philadelphia, for Kinwyd,
I think.
For 6 months, and then the conference purchased property for a new and more centrally located office in Reading. We became parents for the first time. A few weeks after moving to Reading, we became parents for the first time when David Allen arrived on August 29, 1951, our 3rd wedding anniversary, at the Reading General Hospital. Doris then became very busy as a new mother. At the time of David's birth, we lived in the Circle J Ranch in Montagne, and then moved to a town when a townhouse became available on Gregg Avenue.
Drake Avenue. Where's that?
That's must be in Reading, Pennsylvania. We became good friends with neighbors on Gregg Avenue, Marjorie and Lynn Callender. He served as the MV, which doesn't that stand for missionary volunteer?
Could be.
Educational secretary of the conference, and they had 2 young children. They were to be our friends for many years, eventually in California. Lynn died in 1998, but his widow Marjorie lives in nearby Redlands, so we see her often. And here's a photo. In Reading, Don and Doris become parents for the first time. David is 3 or 4 months old here in this photo. And
Yeah, we were good friends.
there is the photo. And that's the end of chapter 6.
That's pretty good. How many chapters are there?
Okay, in Dad's part 1, there are 14 chapters.